What was the actual purpose behind the Death Star? Greetings again, and welcome back to the archives. By all accounts, the Death Star should have never been built. It was meant to serve as the ultimate symbol of the Empire's supremacy, a representation of power beyond the dark side. However, it caused the Empire a myriad of problems which included draining money and resources from all other branches. Grand Admiral Thrawn personally advised that the Death Star was a poor strategic move, and that it was not only a problem for the Empire, but its enemies as well. It was a gigantic target, and Thrawn believed it to essentially be a bottomless pit to throw whatever the Empire had into it. Thrawn called it one of the worst strategic moves that he had ever seen. Even Lord Vader saw the technological terror as a bad idea for a few reasons. He despised the amount of arrogance and insanity that it inspired among the Imperial elite. But despite all of the red flags and clear downsides of the station, Sidious was adamant that its construction not be interrupted, and even insisted on making a second Death Star after the first was destroyed. So why did Palpatine ignore all the signs that the Death Star was a bad strategic move? Well, my friends, the plans of Darth Sidious always run much deeper than they appear, and this is no different. Today's video, we are going to be exploring the inner machinations of the Emperor's plans, and attempt to decipher the true meaning behind the Death Star. If asked directly, Palpatine's answer for the battle station's design was to flex the Imperial power. The overall purpose of the war machine was to keep all the systems in line now that the Emperor had abolished the Senate. He had achieved a totalitarian rule with his regional governors being in charge of most areas of space, and the Death Star would simply be a tool used to ensure that no one attempted to resist this new regime. With a massive gun pointed at the galaxy, no one was going to rise up against the Emperor's decrees. But of course, Sidious also had plans for using the weapon to annihilate the planets and systems that he had always despised. In particular, Mon Calamari. They were a strong people who had thrown off the yoke of the Empire and joined the Rebel Alliance freely. They were supposed to be the next Yavin 4. But otherwise, the Death Star was meant to be a symbol of fear and invincibility. A long time ago, while the Death Star was still in its very early stages of manufacturing, Tarkin sent the Emperor a letter which would go down in history, and Palpatine would name it the Tarkin Doctrine. In it, Tarkin described the idea of the Empire building a weapon of ultimate supremacy, a weapon of substantial size, wanting to keep the vast number of systems in line. Nothing like the Galactic Empire had ever been achieved in history before, so keeping the trillions of beings in the galaxy under one rule was going to take some serious power. Tarkin made the comparison of how an Imperial Star Destroyer is a ship of magnificent size. The Star Destroyer intimidates its opponents instantly. It breaks their will before ever engaging with them. He mentioned that if the Empire were to have a weapon even larger, all the galaxy would be subjected by the same fear. The threat of overwhelming violence was more sufficient than using actual violence to subjugate a citizen. Palpatine admired Tarkin's insight in this, and placed him in charge of the Death Star personally. But this is just the surface level reason why Sidious desired the Death Star, a symbol of Imperial supremacy, an object of fear, and a representation of his and the dark side's power. But that was because Sidious no longer desired for himself and Vader to represent those things. In the Tarkin novel, we actually get a very brief look into Emperor Palpatine's mind. Sidious says these words to Vader: "The sooner the battle station is completed, the sooner you and I can devote ourselves to more pressing matters. Matters only you and I can investigate, and that will have little to do with the Empire." This eyebrow-raising sentence speaks a lot into the true purpose of the Death Star. Sidious in actuality cared very little about making some ultimate weapon of mass destruction. It was merely a tool of convenience, a means to an end. Instead of the two Sith Lords acting as symbols of fear, he wanted the two of them to fade into the background, allowed the Death Star to take that place. Sidious always wanted the Death Star to be a symbol more than a weapon. It was more powerful as a symbol. Tarkin would be in charge, receiving orders from Sidious. The sectors of the galaxy no longer required Palpatine's oversight, which freed up his time and attention to focus on what he deemed to be more pressing. Clearly, matters of the Sith. He desired for Vader to be a part of it, and luckily for us, we do not have to guess what Sidious was alluding to here. Later in the novel, we get a small peek into Palpatine's mind where he says this: he would not allow himself to be sidetracked from his goal of unlocking the secrets of many of the Sith Masters before him, the secrets that they too sought. The means to harness the powers of the dark side, to reshape reality in itself, in effect, to fashion a universe of his own creation. Not the mere immortality of the sort that Plagueis had lusted after, but influence of the ultimate sort. Sidious could not be stopped in achieving an everlasting rule over the Empire. He wanted to transcend even immortality itself. He desired the ability to alter reality, a power we know extremely little about. As he said, he wanted to reshape it itself, to recreate the universe in his image, the image of the Sith, the dark side, the image of Darth Sidious. This goes beyond the megalomania we had thought was Palpatine's limit. He didn't want to be an immortal god emperor. He wanted to be the god. He was likely going to use the shrine in the depths, the Sith shrine, which was located underneath the Jedi Temple, a place of immense power. We've talked at length about this in other videos, but the bottom line is that this was a secret place that only Sidious knew about. Well, besides Yoda. Palpatine hadn't yet shared that information with even Vader, as he still was uncertain whether Vader was trustworthy, but he did plan on eventually bringing his apprentice into the fold, luring him there with promises of getting Padme back, and achieving the ultimate power that Anakin always wanted. The Shrine in the Depths has the potential to grant Sidious anything. It is likely the most powerful dark side location in the entire galaxy. Using it, Sidious was once able to look into Vader's fantasy of a perfect reality, and discover that Luke was his son. We also theorized that Palpatine was able to open a window into the world between worlds using that same shrine, which is how we saw him interact with Ezra and Ahsoka. But if Sidious could spend the time necessary to unlock the secrets of the shrine, the ultimate power of reality would be at his fingertips. But his attention was being pulled back to the Empire. It became Palpatine's literal bane. The object of his obsession was something that he grew to hate. The planets were all getting out of line, and he was struggling to keep order. To Palpatine, what was once his glorious empire had become an incessantly whiny child tugging at his robe day and night. Most of the Moffs and Admirals were either too incompetent to get the job done, or too arrogant to see their own flaws. And the only leader that he could rely on, being Thrawn, would vanish into the unknown regions because of Ezra Bridger. Palpatine needed the Death Star to be a win. He needed it to basically take his spot as the face of the Empire's rule for a period, so that he could finally achieve the true grand plan of the Sith. What's interesting to learn about is how ruling the galaxy was only part one of Sidious's plans. Achieving ultimate dominion over the Republic and the Jedi, finally doing what no other Sith in history had done, was really just a stepping stone. Oftentimes, Star Wars media treats this as the ultimate goal, but behind closed doors, Palpatine had much more plans in the works. If we trace Palpatine's journey from the beginning, we can see his plan unfolding. The crisis of Naboo was to get him in the office of the Chancellor. He could then orchestrate the Clone War. The Clone War was meant to weaken the Republic and the Jedi so that the galaxy would see that they needed an absolute rule to be safe. The manipulation of Dooku was to create the clone army and then lead the Separatists. The clones would gain the trust of the Jedi and then destroy them. And Anakin, the Chosen One, fit perfectly in that plan to secure the end of the Jedi. With the Republic willingly voting themselves into an empire, the Sith had achieved the victory of Dominion. But all of that was a means to an end. Palpatine wanted the Jedi out of his way so that no one could stop him from gaining the godlike power that he sought, the key that the Sith Shrine held. The Tarkin Doctrine presented the right man for the job to lead the Death Star, and after instilling the Senate, he would slowly strip them of power over 2 decades until abolishing them altogether. Then the Death Star was unveiled, and officially served as Palpatine's seal of ownership, but not ownership of the battle station, or even ownership of the Empire. It represented ownership of the galaxy. But now Palpatine wanted the powers of life and death, to use the Chosen One to reshape the galaxy, and soon, the Empire, and even the Death Star would become meaningless under the godlike might of Sidious, the greatest being ever known. He would, of course, have cloned bodies just in case he failed, and in canon, this was an Exegol. In Legends, it was Biss. And even he had backup plans to the Empire in both continuities, the Sith Eternal in canon, and the Dark Empire in Legends. Everything we just stated was the most simplified version of Palpatine's plan. We didn't even talk about all the minute details of keeping this all hidden, organizing the construction and resources of the Death Star, and everything that came along with securing the final destruction of the Jedi Order. Sidious was truly a mad genius, and the Death Star was never the goal, only a piece to fit in the greater scheme. The Sith's grand plan may have been the ownership of the galaxy, but that was only the first act of Palpatine's grand plan, and that was the true purpose of the Death Star. As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel and the archives today, and as always, may the Force be with you.